When the doctor asks who should be notified, the blood pressure cuff tightens, holds, releases. The number appears on the screen. The nurse writes it down. She asks about current medications. She confirms the pharmacy on file. The man answers each question with the efficiency of someone who has done this before. He is not nervous. This is maintenance. He showed up on time. He will leave on time. He has things to do after this. Then the nurse looks at her screen and asks a question in the same flat tone she used for everything else. And if something were to happen, who should we contact? The room does not change. No music swells. The question arrives between the allergy update and the copay confirmation, packed into the ordinary sequence of administrative business that makes a medical visit feel like a trip to the DMV with slightly more vulnerable clothing. He does not answer immediately. Not because the question is confusing. The words are plain. Not because he is emotionally overwhelmed. He is sitting on a paper-covered table in a room that smells like hand sanitizer. He does not answer immediately because the question is simple in language and considerably less simple in structure. He knows who he is. He knows his social security number and his insurance carrier and his blood type, probably. He has been the sole manager of his own affairs for long enough that the management itself has become invisible to him, like breathing, like driving a familiar route. But this question is not asking what he knows. It is asking who else is positioned to act on his behalf when he cannot act for himself. The recognition that lands in that pause is not the recognition of being alone. He has known his living arrangement for years. He does not need a clipboard to inform him of his own domestic geography. The recognition is narrower than that. The system is asking for a human backup where he has been functioning as his own entire operation. The question carries an assumption so embedded that no one in the room thinks to explain it. There is a person. That person can be reached. That person knows enough to be useful. That person will respond. The married man writes his wife's name. The woman with children writes her eldest daughter. The form was designed for a world in which proximity exists, availability exists, and significance can be named quickly. He is not being judged. The nurse has 12 more patients today. She is filling in a field. But the field is a measurement. It measures whether his life fits the relational default the system was designed around. And for the first time in perhaps a very long time, the system is showing him the shape of that default by asking him to fill it. Up to this point, his independence has functioned as proof of competence. Bills paid, schedule handled, crises absorbed, decisions made privately and executed cleanly, the house maintained. He does not generate emergencies for other people. If anything, he is the person others sometimes call when their own arrangements fall apart. The reversal arrives without announcement. The very competence that allowed him to operate alone may have hidden the fact that his system has no second position, no redundancy, no backup, no person who holds a copy of the key, literally or figuratively, who knows where the documents are, who understands the rhythms of his life well enough to notice when one breaks. He does not lack people in a general sense. There may be friends, there may be siblings in other states, former colleagues, a woman he dated some years back, an entire loose constellation of human beings who know his name. But a system under stress does not ask for social atmosphere. It asks for a name, a phone number, a role, and a chain of permission. There is no partial credit. A life can be fully managed in normal conditions and still become administratively fragile in one interrupted afternoon. The doctor's office becomes the first clean mirror, not of loneliness, of authority distribution. It shows in plain administrative language where the power to act on his behalf currently resides. It resides entirely in him, which is fine. until it isn't. Let's stay inside that pause, the actual seconds between the question and whatever answer the man eventually gives. The nurse is not studying him. She is clicking through to the next field. The pause belongs entirely to him, and it is more populated than anyone in the room would guess. He is running a mental list, not an emotional scan, an operational one, filtered in real time against criteria he may not have consciously articulated before. Who is close enough to be appropriate, but not so close that naming them creates an expectation he never agreed to? Who would actually pick up the phone? Who lives in the same state, or at least the same time zone? Who would he trust to hear medical details he himself might not yet know? He may think of a brother in another state. They talk a few times a year. The relationship is fine, it is not hostile. But would his brother know what medications he takes? Would he recognize that the call was urgent, or would he return it 2 days later? He may think of a friend from work, someone reliable. But reliable in a social context and designated in an institutional context are different things. He may think of no one at all. Not because his life is empty, because the specific intersection the form is requesting, reachable, informed, authorized, appropriate, and willing, may not be occupied by any single person he can name without hesitation. So he writes something. A name offered with the slight inflection of a man answering a question he has not fully resolved. Or he says, "I'll get back to you on that," which the nurse accepts without comment. She hears it more often than anyone would guess. The significance is not in the answer. Many people give imperfect answers. Married people list spouses who would be useless in a crisis. The significance is in what had to be assembled under pressure. The rapid, silent, involuntary audit of a life's relational architecture conducted in the time it takes a nurse to click from one screen to the next. The system is not asking who he likes. It is not asking who he would want to have dinner with. It is asking who, in practical terms, stands nearest to his interrupted life. That is a question about structure, not sentiment. He leaves the appointment, pays the copay, walks to the parking lot, drives home or to the grocery store because he needs a few things and the route is convenient. But the question is in the car with him, not as a crisis, more like a piece of mail he opened and set on the counter without fully reading. It is there. He knows it is there. He will deal with it later because the day has other demands, and daily life has a way of reasserting itself with the quiet authority of things that actually need doing. The lawn needs attention. The oil change is overdue. There is something at work, or there was, back when work was the central structure, and now there is something else that fills that space. A routine, a discipline, the architecture of days he has refined until they hold their shape without external reinforcement. This is the life. Not the question from the form. The life itself. And the life works. It is important to establish that now because what follows will examine where the life becomes structurally thin, and that examination is dishonest if it starts from a false premise. The premise that a man living alone past 50 is broken, incomplete, or waiting for correction is the premise of a culture that has never known what to do with men who do not organize their lives around partnership. That premise is wrong. He has built something. It may not match the template. It may not photograph well for the brochures, but it is real. It functions, and it did not build itself. He is competent in the specific sense. He can identify a problem, assess its severity, determine a course of action, and execute without requiring external validation at any step. He does this with money, with health, with the 1,000 small logistical decisions that constitute an adult life in a country that automates nothing and complicates everything. He is careful with money, not necessarily wealthy, but aware of what comes in, what goes out, what is owed, what is saved, what the insurance covers. The plan may exist entirely in his head, but it exists, and it has been stress-tested over years. He is not chaotic. He is not sitting in a dark room. He has interactions. He may have a regular place where he eats, a gym where he is recognized, genuine friendships maintained over years. He may have family relationships that are functional, even if not geographically close. His routines are his own. His standards are his own. His methods of recovery after difficulty are his own. He does not call someone to process every setback. He has his own thresholds for asking for help, and those thresholds are set higher than most people would set them. That is not pathology. That is temperament, shaped by experience and reinforced by results. The house is in order. The accounts are in order. Nothing outwardly suggests deficiency. But here's what lives underneath that order. One structural fact, quiet and easy to miss. Everything runs through one person. Every password, every routine, every expectation, every recovery protocol, every workaround for the large inconveniences and the small ones. All of it lives in one place, in him. As long as he is present and functional, the system runs. It runs better than many systems operated by 2 or more people because single operator systems, when the operator is competent, are extraordinarily efficient. No negotiation, no miscommunication, no lag between identifying a need and addressing it. But efficiency and resilience are not the same thing. A system can be efficient because it has eliminated redundancy and fragile for exactly the same reason. Picture it concretely for a moment. A Wednesday evening in November. The man has a routine procedure the following morning. Nothing alarming, an outpatient thing the doctor recommended. He sets his alarm. He follows the pre-procedure instructions. He drives himself to the facility because he drives himself everywhere. The procedure goes fine. But recovery takes longer than expected. The sedation is heavier than usual. A nurse mentions that someone should drive him home. He says he will arrange it. He sits in the recovery area and considers his options. The friend he might call is at work. The brother is in another state. The neighbor he is friendly with? He has never asked this neighbor for anything, and asking now, groggy and wearing a hospital bracelet, feels like crossing a line he drew years ago for good reasons. He calls a car service. He gets home. He sleeps through the afternoon. The mail sits in the box. The pharmacy calls about the new prescription. He does not hear the phone. The discharge instructions are on a sheet of paper he set on the kitchen counter and has not read carefully because the print is small and his focus is still cloudy. Nothing terrible happens. He recovers. He reads the instructions the next day. He picks up the prescription. The mail gets collected. But for approximately 18 hours, his life was running on residual momentum. No one was monitoring the gap between his normal capacity and his reduced capacity. No one was checking whether the discharge instructions were understood. No one noticed that the pharmacy called and the call was missed. No one knew whether his silence that evening was ordinary silence or something else. 18 hours. That is all. And in those 18 hours, every system in his life was operating on the assumption that the operator was at the controls. He wasn't. That is what structural exposure looks like. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, just a quiet window in which the life runs unattended. And the only reason it runs at all is that nothing additional went wrong. Over years, he refined this independence into something close to philosophy. How much others need to know, how much access others get, how much explanation is necessary. What parts of life remain compartmentalized? How to recover from stress without public display. This design was not accidental. It emerged from temperament, work discipline, past relational complexity, or a simple preference for clean boundaries. The origin matters less than the result. The result is a system that works under ordinary conditions. And because it works, it resists scrutiny. Why examine something that functions? Other people reinforce the resistance. They see a man who shows up, handles things, does not generate emergencies. They see competence, and competence in American culture is treated as a conclusion rather than a description. If he is competent, he is fine. If he is fine, no further inquiry is needed. He may participate in that reading himself, not out of denial, because daily evidence supports it. He shows up. He handles things. He is reliable. But reliability is often mistaken for resilience under interruption. They look identical from the outside. The difference only becomes visible when reliability is tested by something that removes the man from his own operational center. There is a difference between lifestyle and infrastructure. His lifestyle is clear, quiet, self-directed, low drama, controlled environment. That lifestyle is legitimate. It suits him. He earned it. Infrastructure is different. Infrastructure is what holds a life together when the person living it is not actively holding it together. Backup access, designated authority, shared operational awareness, continuity when the primary operator is offline. A man can have a strong lifestyle and thin infrastructure, and never know it, because the two feel identical as long as conditions remain normal. The distinction between them is becoming central to this conversation, and it began with a question so ordinary that the nurse who asked it has already forgotten she asked it. A name, a number, a field on a screen. What exactly has been built here over all these years? A durable life, or a one-person operating system with no recognized second seat? That question does not have a simple answer. The man who hears it deserves better than a simple answer, because his life is not simple, and his choices were not made carelessly. But the question is open now. The form opened it. The pause opened it. And it is worth following. Surface stability is not false. It is simply not the same thing as continuity under interruption. The world he moves through was not designed with him in mind. That is not a complaint. It is an observation about how institutions operate. And it matters now because the conversation has moved from what he has built to how the systems around him read what he has built. Institutions do not encounter the whole man. They encounter fragments, a chart number, a policy ID, an insurance entry, a billing pipeline, a discharge process, a missed callback. They are not evaluating his character. They are testing whether his life can interface with their systems during periods of reduced control. From the institutional perspective, the questions are practical. Who can receive information? Not who cares. Who is legally positioned to receive a phone call containing protected health information? HIPAA does not make exceptions for good intentions. A friend who calls the hospital asking about him may be told nothing. A sibling who is not listed may be told nothing. Who can appear, not who would want to. Who is expected by the system, whose presence would be recognized as legitimate by the people managing the process. Who understands context, not who has known him longest. Who knows what medications he takes, what his baseline looks like, what reactions he has had before, what conditions are being monitored. Who carries continuity, not who shows up once. Who maintains the thread across days, across decisions, across the transition from acute care to recovery to follow-up to the return home. These questions are impersonal. They are bureaucratic. Most patients pass them without effort because the relational structure of their lives provides automatic answers. His life may not provide automatic answers. Not because it is deficient, because it is differently organized. and the institution does not recognize differently organized. It recognizes filled fields and empty fields. A man can be brilliant, disciplined, and fully in command of his own affairs and still be structurally undefined in the eyes of a hospital that needs to route information, obtain consent, and coordinate care. The system is not reading his resume. It is reading his intake form. He may feel fully sovereign. He is fully sovereign. But sovereignty and institutional legibility are not the same thing. The system recognizes records faster than it recognizes persons. Here is what that looks like at 2 in the morning. A man is admitted through the emergency department. Not the man we have been discussing necessarily. A man like him. Same age, same configuration, same well-maintained independence. He came in with chest pain that turned out to be something less severe but still requiring overnight observation. He is in a bed. The lights are low. A monitor tracks his heart rate. The nurse on the overnight shift has 14 patients. She checks on him periodically. He is stable. The chart says what it says. But the chart does not say that he has a dog at home that has not been fed. It does not say that his car is in the hospital parking garage and the meter will expire in the morning. It does not say that he had a meeting scheduled for 9 o'clock that no one will know to cancel. It does not say that his pharmacy sent a refill notification to his phone, which is on silent in a plastic bag with his wallet and his keys. The chart says his blood pressure, his oxygen level, his medication allergies, and his insurance carrier. The man is awake. He is not in danger. But he is inside a system now, and the system has its own pace, its own priorities, and its own definition of what matters. What matters to the system is clinical. What matters to the man is everything else. And everything else is unattended. He could make calls, his phone is in the bag, but it is 1:30 in the morning and who does he call? The brother will panic. The friend from the gym does not know his medical situation. The neighbor? He does not have the neighbor's number. Or if he does, calling at this hour would create a debt of explanation and concern that he is not prepared to take on while wearing a hospital gown. So he lies there, managing in his mind, running the list. The dog will be hungry in the morning, but fine. The car can get a ticket, he will pay it. The meeting, someone will assume something. The pharmacy will call again. He manages the unmanageable from a hospital bed by deciding that each consequence is survivable. And he is right. Each one is. But he is doing it alone at 2 in the morning in a room where the only other presence is a monitor and a nurse he has never met. And the management he is performing is not medical. It is the management of the gap between his private life and the institutional process that has temporarily absorbed him. That gap is the authority gap, and it is wider than it looks. The gap exists between someone I know and someone who holds authority in a meaningful sense. A friend may care, a relative may exist, a neighbor may notice. But each of these is different from being designated, being informed, being reachable, being willing, being trusted by systems, and knowing what to do next. Most people assume these things overlap. They assume that caring and being authorized are naturally connected. They are not. Authorization is a function of documentation, designation, and preparation. Caring is a feeling. Institutions do not run on feelings. The assumptions fail quickly under stress. He probably listed someone. Maybe he did. Maybe the number is disconnected. Somebody must know. Know what? His medication list? His insurance carrier? His wishes regarding resuscitation? They'll reach his family. Which family? Where? And what will that family member be able to do from 800 miles away at 2 in the morning? He has people. In what functional sense? People who would be sad, yes. People positioned at the intersection of awareness, permission, credibility, and timing? that is a much smaller set. In daily life, informal connection feels sufficient. Inside a health event, informal connection often proves non-transferable. The social trust that works at a barbecue does not work at a hospital intake desk. Now widen the lens beyond the overnight stay. A health disruption does not arrive alone. It brings companions, and the companions do not wait in line. They arrive simultaneously. Cognition may be affected, even mildly. Sedation slows processing. Pain narrows attention. Anxiety compresses judgment. The man who normally operates at full capacity is operating at 70% or 50% or less. Schedule fractures immediately. Appointments missed. Obligations unmet. The daily architecture that held everything in place was maintained by a person who is no longer maintaining it. Transportation is compromised. If he cannot drive, and no one is designated to drive him, the post-discharge logistics alone become a problem that the hospital will note in the chart but will not solve. Bills continue arriving. The mortgage does not know he is in the hospital. The credit card statement does not know. The utility company does not know. For a short stay, this is trivial. For a 3-week recovery, it is not. Property oversight lapses. If he owns a home, the home does not pause. A pipe can freeze. A delivery can sit on the porch. Mail accumulates in the box, signaling absence to anyone paying attention. Medication tracking becomes complex. New prescriptions interact with existing ones. The man himself may not be the most reliable tracker of his own medication schedule during recovery, and no one else knows the schedule. Communication breaks down in a specific way. People who expect to hear from him do not hear from him. They may or may not interpret the silence correctly. He goes quiet sometimes. That is known. So the silence that means something gets absorbed into the pattern of silence that means nothing. And by the time someone begins to wonder, the silence may have already lasted too long. The principle operating here is concentration. Everything that keeps the life running is concentrated in one person. Under normal conditions, concentration is efficiency. Under interruption, concentration is cascading exposure. He may have enough money. Money does not fill out discharge paperwork. Money does not appear in a waiting room with context. Money does not distinguish between a routine delay and a meaningful decline. The issue is whether money, property, instructions, access, and timing remain coordinated when the coordinator is temporarily removed. And now, the hardest part of this examination. The part that touches something deeper than logistics. Many men in this position resist the suggestion that they should do anything differently. The resistance is not irrational. It is rooted in something real. Dignity. He does not want to appear dependent, not because he is vain, because dependency, as he has observed it in others, comes with costs that are not advertised. Supervision, opinions, the subtle shift in how people treat you once they know you need something. He has seen it. The person who admits need becomes the person who is managed. He does not want to recruit people into roles that were not freely offered. Asking someone to be his emergency contact is not a neutral request. It introduces obligation. It changes terms. It says, I am placing a claim on your availability that may activate without warning. He does not want to expose unfinished private arrangements. His documents may not be in perfect order. Making that someone else's business feels like displaying a gap he would rather address on his own timeline. He does not want to become discussable. This may be the deepest resistance. He does not want to be the subject of concerned conversations. He does not want to overhear the sentence that begins with, "Have you talked to him about?" He wants to be a person who manages his own life, and being a topic is the opposite of that. This resistance protects order, privacy, and self-respect. It has served those functions for years, but it creates a paradox that the medical form has quietly exposed. The measures used to preserve dignity may reduce operational protection in precisely those moments when dignity is hardest to preserve. Think about it concretely. A man is sedated, confused, recovering, or simply unreachable. That is the moment when his dignity is most at risk. Not because anyone intends to violate it, because a person who is not available to manage his own presentation has his presentation managed by systems and strangers. The chart says what it says. The nurse's notes say what they say. And if no one who knows him is present, his institutional identity is defined entirely by data. The man who protected his dignity by maintaining privacy may find his dignity less protected in the exact scenario the form was asking about. Because dignity in an institutional setting is not maintained by privacy. It is maintained by presence. The presence of someone who can say, "This is who he is. This is what he would want." Without that presence, dignity is at the mercy of the process. And the process is efficient, but it is not personal. Now the existential dimension sharpens. What happens if the scenario is not dramatic? Not a heart attack, not a stroke, just an absence from his own role for a period of time. A planned surgery, a medication adjustment with unexpected effects, a fall that limits mobility for a month. Who notices the difference between a delay and a decline? His brother in another state is not positioned to see the mail piling up. His friend who calls every few weeks is not positioned to know that the usual Tuesday pattern has been broken for 10 days. The pharmacy notices the prescription was not picked up. It sends an automated reminder to a phone in a dark room. Not everyone who cares is positioned to witness. Not everyone who witnesses is positioned to act. The issue is not companionship. It is whether a human being exists at the intersection of 4 specific capacities. Awareness, knowing his ordinary patterns well enough to detect a deviation. Permission, having the standing to inquire, to access, to intervene. Credibility, being recognized by institutions as someone whose word about this man's life carries weight. Timing, being close enough in communication frequency to detect a problem before it compounds. That intersection is rare unless deliberately formed. Picture the mailbox. It is a Tuesday. The mail has been collecting since Friday, 4 days. The carrier pushes the new mail against the old. By Thursday, the box is full and the carrier leaves a bundle at the door. By the following Tuesday, a neighbor glances over and thinks he must be traveling. He is not traveling. He is in a rehabilitation center 40 minutes away recovering from a procedure that had complications. He has been there for 6 days. He told no one because he expected to be home in 2 days and did not want the conversation. The dog is at the vet, boarded under an arrangement he made by phone from the hospital. The car is in his driveway. The lights in the house are on timers. From the outside, nothing is visibly wrong. But inside the house, the refrigerator contains food that is expiring. A faucet he meant to fix before the procedure is dripping into the sink. His laptop is open on the kitchen table, logged into his bank account, the session long since timed out. The discharge instructions from the first facility are on the counter, partially relevant, partially superseded by what the rehabilitation center has since prescribed. His life is intact, but it is on pause, and no one is pressing play. The rehabilitation center has asked for a contact person. He gave his brother's name. His brother received a call on day 1. His brother, concerned but uncertain, said he would check in. He called once, left a voicemail. Assumed things were being handled because his brother has always handled things. 14 days pass before the man returns home. He collects the mail. He cleans the refrigerator. He fixes the faucet. He picks up the dog. He resumes the routine. Nothing terrible happened, but for 2 weeks his life was structurally unwitnessed, not unrecorded. The hospital had records. The rehab center had records. His brother had a voicemail he saved. The vet had the dog. Unwitnessed. No one held the full picture. No one saw the gap between what his life normally looked like and what it looked like during those 2 weeks. No one could have told a doctor, this is not normal for him. No one could have told an institution, here is what he needs and here is what he would want. His interruption entered the world as data. Chart updates, call logs, billing codes, pharmacy alerts, institutional records that documented the event without knowing the person it was happening to. Who received the meaning? Not the data, the meaning. What it meant for this particular man with this particular history to lose control of his own life for 14 days. What it cost him, in private terms, that no chart recorded and no billing code captured. That is not tragedy. It is not the climax of a film. It is something quieter. Unshared reality. The condition of experiencing something significant inside a system that processes the event without knowing the person. The most serious exposure in a well-run solitary life is not lack of resources. It is lack of authorized continuity. The absence of a person who carries the thread from one side of an interruption to the other so that the life on the far side is still recognizably his. That is what the doctor's office was asking about, in the flattest possible language, in the most ordinary possible setting, between the blood pressure reading and the copay. It was asking whether the thread has a second holder. There is a sentence that lives in the background of a life like this. It is never spoken aloud, but it operates as a load-bearing wall inside the architecture of self-management. I'll deal with it when it comes. The sentence has earned its place. It was tested against reality, and reality confirmed it. The furnace failed in January, and he found a contractor. The company restructured, and he adapted. A relationship ended, and he absorbed the aftermath privately and kept functioning. The car broke down on a highway, and he handled it. Problems arrived. He dealt with them. The system held. The problem with the sentence is not that it is wrong. The problem is that it contains a hidden assumption so embedded it is nearly invisible. The assumption is that he will be present to do the dealing. Present, functional, capable of assessing, deciding, executing, following through. Every time the sentence was confirmed by experience, it was confirmed under conditions in which the operator was intact. Stressed, maybe. Tired, maybe. But there, cognitively online, standing at the center of his own crisis, managing it. A health event introduces a different condition. Not stress, not fatigue. Reduced executive functioning, sedation, post-surgical fog, pain that narrows attention, medication that slows processing, or, in a more serious case, inability to communicate at all. In that condition, the sentence breaks. Not because it was foolish, because the man who will deal with it is the same man the event is happening to. The system designed to respond to disruption through the continuous functioning of its operator fails when the disruption targets the operator. That is not a moral failure. It is a design limitation, and every system has design limitations. The question is whether the limitation has been accounted for. For most of his life, it has been hidden, because the long run has been genuinely successful. Because every time something went wrong, he was there to fix it, and the fixing reinforced the belief that the system was complete. But complete and tested under all conditions are not the same thing. A bridge can be complete and still have a load rating. A life can be complete and still have a condition under which its primary mechanism does not function. The condition is not exotic. It is the condition that every human body eventually presents to its occupant, being, for a period of time, unable to serve as one's own executive. He has maintained an internal contract over years. The terms were never written down. They were established through practice. I do not burden others unnecessarily. I do not expose weak points casually. I do not ask for participation before it is required. I keep my affairs in order. I remain difficult to destabilize. Strong terms, disciplined terms. They have produced a strong, disciplined life. He is respected for his reliability. People around him have learned that he handles his own affairs, and they have accepted that arrangement because it asks nothing of them. But under interruption, the contract reveals a cost that was not included in the original terms. No one knows enough soon enough. Because information was shared on a need-to-know basis, and the definition of need was set by the man himself, and he set it conservatively. A friend may know he had a doctor's appointment. That friend probably does not know what was discussed, what was prescribed, what conditions are being monitored. No one knows what is normal for him. He knows his own baseline. He knows when his energy is off, when his body is not performing to standard. But that knowledge has not been exported. No one holds a copy of his baseline, which means no one can detect a deviation from it. No one can tell whether the silence matters. He goes quiet sometimes. That is known. His communication patterns are irregular enough that a gap of a few days does not register as a signal. So the silence that means something gets absorbed into the pattern of silence that means nothing. And by the time someone begins to wonder, the silence may have already lasted too long. No one can step in without crossing lines that were never clearly drawn. Even if someone suspects something is wrong, the contract has not defined when a friend is allowed to call twice, show up at the door, or contact someone else. The boundaries between respectful distance and neglectful inaction were never established because the contract assumed they would never need to be. The destabilizing recognition is not the obvious one. It is not, "I have no one." That is too blunt and may not even be accurate. The recognition is more precise. No one may be structurally close enough to distinguish a problem from a delay. A delay is normal. A man goes quiet for a few days, misses a pattern, does not answer the phone. Delays resolve themselves. They do not require intervention. A problem is not a delay. A problem is a man who is not quiet by choice, but by circumstance, who has not missed a pattern but has been removed from the pattern, who does not answer the phone because he cannot reach the phone. Telling the difference requires proximity that the internal contract, by its own terms, has generally not permitted. The privacy that protected him from intrusion also protects the problem from detection. The boundaries that kept others at respectful distance also keep warning signals on the wrong side of the line. The contract was not flawed. It was incomplete. It accounted for sovereignty under normal conditions. It did not account for sovereignty under interrupted conditions, because under interrupted conditions, sovereignty does not function the same way. Control is not just his method. It is his architecture. Remove the control, and the life does not just change in degree. It changes in kind. It becomes a different structure. That prospect is not uncomfortable. It is existentially threatening in the way that any challenge to foundational identity is threatening. So when the medical system asks for a notification contact, the request feels disproportionate. On the surface, it is a clerical matter. Beneath the surface lies a more invasive proposition. Name the person who stands nearest to your interrupted self. Not your social self, not your functional self, your interrupted self. the one that exists when you are not performing the role you have spent a lifetime constructing, the one that is horizontal, medicated, dependent on systems you did not choose. That is not the same as listing an acquaintance. It is an exposure of relational architecture. A man can endure pain privately. He has done it. The dental work he did not mention, the back problem managed with careful movement, the sleepless stretch pushed through. He has a practiced relationship with private endurance. He can recover privately. The flu no one heard about until it was over. The minor surgery he attended alone. He can even fail privately for a time. A bad financial quarter absorbed and adjusted without audience. But once institutions take over, privacy changes function. Inside an institution, privacy is not a shield. It is an absence of information. And the absence of information does not protect the man. It slows the process. It forces decisions without context. The people managing his care are managing a chart, not a person, because the person has not been translated into institutional language by anyone who knows him. Privacy without witness becomes delay. A decision that could take an hour takes 3 because no one can confirm what the patient would want. Privacy without witness becomes ambiguity. The medical team is not sure whether his confusion is new or baseline, whether his insistence that he is fine reflects improvement or the habitual insistence of a man who always says he is fine. Privacy without witness becomes unverified absence. A man not speaking for himself, with no one speaking for him, is to the system a set of data points without narrative. The hardest part is not the practical friction. It is the existential dimension. His interruption may enter the world as data before it enters the world as known experience. A chart updated, a call logged, a billing code assigned, a pharmacy alert issued, a bed number, a shift rotation, all of it happening efficiently, according to protocol. But who receives the meaning? Not who processes the data. Who understands what this interruption means for this particular man? Who knows what he was doing before it happened? Who knows what his life looks like when it is running correctly? Who can place the event inside the context of a specific human life rather than a clinical episode? If no one, then the event is real but unwitnessed in the human sense. Recorded, documented, billed, not known. That recognition that a meaningful interruption could remain structurally unwitnessed until institutions have already defined the situation is the center of what has been building since the first scene in the doctor's office. It is not tragedy. It is not the end of anything. It is the quiet center of a structural truth that becomes visible only when you look at a well-built life from the one angle its builder never had reason to examine. The question raised at the beginning, what has independence actually been built on, now receives its most difficult answer. Uninterrupted self-presence. The discipline is real. The competence is real. The order is real. None of it is false. But all of it operates on a condition so fundamental it has never been questioned. The condition is that he is there, running the system, making the decisions, correcting the errors, maintaining the standard. That condition is not guaranteed, not at 50, not at 60, not on any particular Tuesday. The recognition is destabilizing, but it is not destructive. It does not collapse the structure. It does not invalidate the life. It reveals the hidden condition under which the whole system has remained admirable and intact. And the condition is simply this: the operator was always on duty. The question is, what happens the first time the operator is not? A one-man life can remain highly functional for decades while still depending, more than it appears, on the continued availability of the one man himself. The recognition does not require dismantling anything. That is worth saying plainly, because the man who has followed this conversation to this point may be bracing for the part where he is told to change, where the tone shifts to prescription, where the analysis gives way to a list of things he should do, people he should call, emotions he should feel. That is not what happens here. The problem, reframed, is narrower than expected. It is this: can the life system remain legible and continuous when personal control temporarily narrows? Legible, meaning someone other than the operator can read it. The bills, accounts, insurance, medications, documents, preferences, passwords, obligations, not locked inside one mind. Enough of it externalized that the life, if it had to be explained to someone managing it for a short time, could be explained. Continuous, meaning the thread is not cut when the operator steps away. Mail handled, appointments kept or rescheduled, property monitored, medical instructions followed, recovery observed. The life does not simply stop and wait, accumulating consequences until the man returns to his position. This is a reconstruction in terms of architecture, not emotion, not personality. He does not need to become different in personality. The personality produced results that most institutional structures would envy: clarity of purpose, efficient execution, low waste, high standards. These are not deficits. He does not need to become socially expansive. The prescription to be more social is one of the most common and least useful pieces of advice given to men in his position. It fails because it treats the symptom while misunderstanding the structure. The issue is not insufficient socializing. The issue is the absence of a specific structural role. He does not need to narrate his life publicly. The reconstruction does not require transparency in the therapeutic sense. It requires designation. A much smaller, more precise, more controllable action. He does not need to become dependent in order to acknowledge that interdependence exists at specific points of transfer. That distinction is critical. Dependency is a state. It implies ongoing reliance, reduced autonomy, a shift in the power dynamic of daily life. That is not what is being described. A point of transfer is a specific, bounded, identifiable moment in which control passes temporarily from one position to another. The question is whether that second position is occupied. Dependency changes who you are. A point of transfer changes what happens during a specific event. Those are fundamentally different things, and conflating them is one of the reasons men in this position resist the entire conversation. They hear dependency when the subject is continuity. They hear surrender when the subject is design. The structural vulnerability, reframed, is not a failure of independence. It is an incompleteness of continuity design, and continuity design is an engineering problem, not a character problem. A CEO who designates a deputy is not weaker. A pilot with a co-pilot is not less skilled. An architect who includes redundancy in a building is not less confident in the primary structure. He is accounting for the fact that primary structures are sometimes unavailable. The same logic applies here. Without sentimentality, without therapy language, without any implication that the man has been doing something wrong. He has been doing something right. So right, for so long, that the one thing he has not done has been invisible. Every serious system eventually requires a second seat, not a replacement operator, not a co-manager, not a partner in any romantic or domestic sense. A continuity position. A seat that remains empty under normal conditions and activates when the primary operator is temporarily offline. The second seat is not emotionally central. It does not need to be. It requires specific attributes, and those attributes are practical, reachable, not theoretically, actually. The call is placed, the phone is answered, the person responds within the window the situation requires. Informed enough, not fully informed, not carrying a complete map, but enough. the medications, the insurance carrier, the location of important documents, the name of the primary care physician, the existence of legal documents like a power of attorney or advance directive. Enough to be useful. Acknowledged. The person knows they are in the second seat. This cannot be silently assigned. A man cannot write a friend's name on a form and never mention it. The role must be known to both parties. Credible. A designated healthcare proxy carries more weight than a self-described friend. A person listed on legal documents carries more weight than someone claiming to be important. Credibility is a function of documentation, not affection. Proximate enough to matter. Close enough in communication frequency and response time to act within the window the situation requires. These attributes are operational specifications. They can be met by a range of people: a sibling who is willing and available, a friend who is organized and trustworthy, a niece or nephew who is mature enough, a professional in some cases, an attorney or a fiduciary, who can serve the function if personal candidates are not available. Think about what this looks like in practice. A man sits down on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee. He has a folder, physical or digital. In it, he places his insurance information, his medication list, the name and number of his primary care doctor, his pharmacy, a copy of his driver's license, the location of his will, if he has one, the password to his email, or at least a recovery method, his mortgage company or landlord contact, a brief note about any ongoing medical condition. He does not enjoy assembling this folder. It is not a pleasant Saturday activity, but it takes approximately 2 hours, maybe 3, and when it is done, it exists independently of his memory. It is a thing in the world, not just a thing in his head. Then he has a conversation. One conversation with one person. It may be brief. It may be slightly awkward, in the way that practical conversations about serious subjects are sometimes awkward between people who are not accustomed to having them. He says something like this: I put some information together, medical, financial, practical. If something happens and I can't manage things for a while, this is where you'll find what you need. I'd like you to be the person the hospital calls. The other person says yes or no. If yes, the role is established. If no, he asks someone else. That is the scope of the action, not a lifestyle change, not a philosophical transformation, a folder and a conversation. The man's dignity is preserved entirely. He decided who, he decided what, he decided the terms. He controlled the process the way he controls every process. The only difference is that the process now extends past the boundary of his own continuous presence. He can update the folder when things change. He can change the person if circumstances shift. He can revise the terms. The second seat is his seat. He built it. He fills it. He maintains it. It is as much a product of his autonomy as every other system he runs. Delegated continuity is not surrender. It is design maturity. Now let the reconstruction breathe for a moment. Step back from the practical and return to something that has been running beneath the surface since the beginning. The word witness has appeared in this conversation several times. It has been used carefully because it is a word that can slide into sentiment. In popular culture, being witnessed means being seen, being known, being understood in some deep emotional way. That is not the meaning here. A witness, in this context, is the person who can confirm the reality of interruption, who can say to a medical team, yes, this is happening, this is the situation. A witness is the person who can carry continuity across a threshold, who can take the thread of the man's life from his hand when he cannot hold it, and carry it across the gap until he can hold it again. Not redefine it, not improve it, carry it. A witness is the person who prevents a private life from becoming administratively anonymous during a period of reduced control, who ensures that the man is not merely processed, but recognized. Not recognized in the romantic sense, recognized as a person with a history, preferences, and a life that was running before the interruption and needs to continue running after. That is a disciplined concept of human proximity. It does not require love, although love might be present. It does not require daily contact. It does not require shared history, although shared history helps. It requires designation, preparation, acknowledgement. It requires the man to make one decision he has not yet made, and to make it not under duress, not in a hospital, not on a form he did not expect, but in the calm, controlled manner that has characterized every good decision he has ever made. Here is something that does not get discussed often enough. The difference between making this decision at 62 in your own kitchen on a Saturday morning and making it at 67 in a preoperative holding area while a nurse waits for an answer. In your kitchen, you are sovereign. You have time. You have clarity. You can think through the options, weigh the candidates, prepare the documents, have the conversation on your terms. In the holding area, you are already inside the system. The gown is on. The IV is prepped. The question is being asked not as planning, but as procedure, and the answer you give under those conditions is not the answer of a man who has prepared. It is the answer of a man who is assembling under pressure. Every year between now and that holding area is a year in which the decision can be made calmly. Every year it is deferred is a year in which the probability of making it under pressure increases. That is not a scare tactic, it is arithmetic. The presence of a recognized second position does not diminish sovereignty. It protects sovereignty when sovereignty cannot be actively performed. When the man is himself fully operational, the second seat is empty. It does nothing, it costs nothing, it changes nothing about the daily texture of his life. When the man is not himself, temporarily, for a bounded period, the second seat activates. And its activation is not a commentary on his strength, it is a function of his planning. It exists because he put it there. That is sovereignty extended into the one domain it has not yet reached. The issue was never whether he should become less independent. The issue was whether independence had been asked to do a job it was never designed to do alone. Independence handles daily life, routine, decision-making, problem-solving, maintenance, finance, the 1,000 demands of an adult life. Independence does all of that. It was designed for all of that. Independence was not designed to handle its own interruption. No system is. No operating system manages its own crash. No pilot flies the plane while unconscious. No surgeon operates on himself. The expectation that independence should handle its own absence is a category error. And it is the one category error a highly competent man might make, precisely because his competence has made every other category error unthinkable. The reconstruction does not ask him to abandon independence. It asks him to stop assigning independence a task it cannot perform. It asks him to take the one function that independence cannot serve and assign it to the one structural element that can. A designated second position, occupied by a person he has chosen, under terms he has defined, for conditions he has specified. That is it. A folder, a conversation, a name on a form given with certainty instead of hesitation. The rest continues as before: the house, the routine, the schedule, the standards, the privacy, the autonomy, the life he built, running exactly as he built it to run, with one addition. One corridor that now leads to a door, and behind the door not emptiness, but a person who has been briefed, acknowledged, and prepared to stand at the line if the line is ever reached. A mature life system does not abandon autonomy. It accounts for the moments when autonomy cannot personally report for duty. There is a particular kind of calm that comes from having looked at something directly, not the calm of ignorance, which is easy and fragile, not the calm of denial, which requires constant maintenance. The calm of having examined a structural truth without flinching and finding that the truth, while significant, is addressable. The man's life is not in crisis. His identity is not under threat. His independence is not being revoked. His history of competence is not being questioned. What has been said in the quietest possible terms is that the architecture has one unaddressed element, and the element can be addressed without redesigning the architecture. The building stands. It has stood for a long time. It will continue to stand. But one corridor leads to a door that opens on to nothing. And behind that door, the institutional world is waiting for a human connection that has not been formalized. The formalization is not romantic. It is not therapeutic. It is administrative. A conversation, a document, a designation, a phone number. The kind of thing that takes an afternoon. And it is the kind of thing a man who has handled everything else can handle. Because it is, in the end, just another structural problem. A clear one. A solvable one. Now. Return to the doctor's office. Same room, same fluorescent lights, same hand sanitizer, same paper-covered table. Maybe 6 months have passed. Maybe a year. The appointment is routine. Blood pressure, medication review. The nurse clicks through her screens. Who should we notify if something happens? The question has not changed. The tone has not changed. She asks it the same way she asked it last time. She is filling in a field. But the man who hears it has shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone in the room would detect, but in the way that structural understanding changes a person's relationship to a question they have been asked before. He does not hear it as a social embarrassment. He has been alone for a long time, and aloneness is not a confession. It is a fact about how he arranged his life, and facts do not require apology. He does not hear it as a moral verdict. The verdict model assumes his life was supposed to follow a particular sequence and that deviation represents deficiency. That model is wrong. His life followed its own sequence for reasons that are his, and the reasons are sufficient. He does not hear it as proof that the life is incomplete. The life is a functioning system. What this examination identified is a specific structural element addressing a specific contingency. That is not incompleteness. That is a design update. Design updates are what competent operators do when new information reveals a gap. What he hears now is a systems question. Where does continuity go if control briefly stops? If the man who runs everything is temporarily unable to run anything, does the life continue? Does information flow? Do decisions get made? Does the thread hold? Is there a person at the boundary between his private life and the institutional world? Is that person designated, informed, reachable? Is his existence recognized beyond his own active management of it? That last question reaches past logistics. A man can manage his existence actively for his entire adult life. He can curate it, maintain it, direct it, defend it against entropy with sustained attention. He can do this so successfully that his existence becomes a product of his own continuous effort. The life looks the way it looks because he makes it look that way, every day. But existence that depends on active management becomes invisible when the management pauses. Not invisible to the universe, invisible to the systems he will need during a period of reduced control, invisible to the hospital that needs a contact, invisible to the process that needs a human interface between its protocols and his life. The second seat provides that interface, not emotional rescue, not companionship. Translation. The translation of a private, self-contained life into institutional language that a hospital, a bank, a pharmacy, or a legal system can understand and act on. Without that translation, the life does not cease to exist during an interruption, but it ceases to be legible. And legibility determines whether things proceed smoothly or with the kind of friction that no amount of money or planning can eliminate without a designated human being standing in the gap. There is one more thing worth addressing before this conversation closes, something that has been present but unspoken. The question of whether it is too late. A man past 50 who has lived this way for decades may look at the reconstruction and think, I should have done this 20 years ago. The fact that I didn't means something. It means this is who I am. It means the pattern is fixed. That thought is understandable. It is also wrong. The window has nothing to do with age and everything to do with willingness. A folder can be assembled at any age. A conversation can be had at any age. A name can be placed on a form at any age. The man who is 63 and has never designated a second seat is not further from the solution than the man who is 45 and has never thought about it. He may be closer because he has now seen the problem clearly, and seeing clearly is the hardest part. The execution is simple. It is the seeing that takes time. There is also the question of who. Some men will know immediately. They will think of one person and the person will be right. Not perfect, right enough. Reachable, willing, competent, proximate enough. The conversation will be straightforward because the relationship already supports it. Some men will not know immediately. The scan will come up uncertain. The brother is too far. The friend is too peripheral. The niece is too young. There is no obvious candidate. For those men, two things are true at the same time. First, the absence of an obvious candidate is itself important information. It confirms the gap is real and not theoretical. Second, the absence does not mean no candidate exists. It means the candidate may need to be identified through a different kind of looking. Not looking for a best friend, not looking for the deepest relationship in his life, looking for the most structurally appropriate one. The person who is organized enough, available enough, close enough, and willing enough to serve a specific function under specific conditions. That person may surprise him. It may be someone he would not have considered in the context of friendship, but who makes perfect sense in the context of operational continuity. A cousin who is meticulous with details. A former colleague who lives nearby and has always been steady. A neighbor who is, as it turns out, a retired nurse. The second seat is not a reflection of emotional depth. It is a reflection of structural fit. And if, after honest searching, no personal candidate emerges, professional options exist. An attorney can hold documents and serve as a designated agent. A fiduciary can manage financial continuity. A professional patient advocate can interface with medical systems. These are not failures of the personal. They are extensions of the same competence the man has always applied to problems that need solving. The point is not how the seat is filled. The point is that it is filled by someone under terms he controls before the situation requires it. One more scene. A man is in his kitchen on a Sunday evening, late fall. The windows are dark. He has eaten, the dishes are done. The house is quiet in the way his house is always quiet, which is to say, it is quiet in the way he prefers. On the table is a folder, manila maybe, or a plain white envelope. Inside it is a sheet of paper with his insurance information, his medication list, the name of his doctor, the location of his will, the contact number for his bank, and a few other details he decided were relevant. He assembled it that afternoon. It took less time than he expected. Tomorrow, or this week, or this month, he will have a conversation with the person whose name he has decided on. The conversation will be brief. It will be practical. It will not be sentimental. He will hand over a copy of the folder or tell the person where the folder is, and he will say something direct, something that sounds like him, something that does not perform vulnerability or request pity. Something like, "I've got my information organized. If I'm ever out of commission for a while, here's what you'd need." The other person will nod or ask a question or say something simple in return. The exchange will take 10 minutes, maybe 15. It will not feel like a turning point. It will feel like an errand. But it will be the errand that closes the one open corridor in a life that is otherwise fully built. The way he handles everything. When the doctor asks who should be notified, the real subject is not emergency contact. It never was. The real subject is whether a private, well-managed life can remain legible, protected, and human when the man at its center is briefly unable to manage it himself. That question does not belong to the medical system. The medical system merely surfaced it. The question belongs to the man. It has belonged to him longer than the form has been asking it. It will continue to belong to him after the appointment is over and the parking lot is crossed and the evening resumes its ordinary shape. The question is not urgent in the way that emergencies are urgent. It does not require action tonight. It does not require a phone call before dinner, but it is present. It has been made present by the examination itself and by the man's willingness to sit inside it without deflecting. The system has always worked. That remains true. And the reason it has always worked is standing in the parking lot holding his keys. He is the reason. His attention, his discipline, his judgment, his willingness to carry the full weight of his own life without distributing it, without complaining, without asking anyone to notice how much he carries alone. That is considerable. It is the kind of sustained effort that rarely receives recognition precisely because it does not generate the kind of visible need that attracts recognition. The man who never asks for help does not receive credit for not needing it. He becomes invisible in the category of need, and that invisibility is both his protection and his exposure. He has been invisible in that category for a long time, not invisible as a person, invisible specifically in the category of need. Because need, as far as the visible world is concerned, is something he does not display. The form was the first formal acknowledgement from an external system that the category exists. That need, in the structural sense, is not about character. It is about what happens when the systems a man has built reach the boundary of what one person can maintain alone. That boundary is not a wall. It is more like a property line. On one side, his authority is total. He decides everything. He manages everything. He is the executive, the administrator, the financial officer, the medical advocate, the legal agent, and the sole witness to his own life. On the other side, institutions take over. The hospital does not wait for him to recover executive function before making decisions about his care. The billing system does not pause. The pharmacy does not hold the prescription indefinitely. The mortgage does not pause. The world does not pause. On his side of the line, he is sovereign. On the other side, he is a case. The second seat stands on that property line. It does not exist on his side where sovereignty is intact. It does not exist on the institutional side where systems follow their own logic. It exists at the boundary. Its function is to ensure that the transition, if it happens, preserves as much of his sovereignty, dignity, and coherence as the situation allows. Without that point of contact, the transition is abrupt. The man goes from managing his own life to being managed by a system that does not know him beyond what the chart contains. With that point of contact, the transition is mediated. Someone is present who can say, "Here is who he is." Here is what he takes. Here is what he would want. Here is where his documents are. Here is the shape of his life. That mediation does not guarantee a perfect outcome. Nothing does. But it changes the man's position within the institutional process from anonymous to known, from a chart without context to a person with an advocate, from a case to be managed to a life to be continued. That shift is what the second seat provides. Nothing more, nothing less. The afternoon light shifts. The parking lot is ordinary. The car starts. The route home is familiar. The evening will proceed as evenings proceed, with whatever rhythm he has established, whatever order he maintains in the space that is entirely his. Nothing about that order needs to change tonight. But somewhere in the architecture of that evening, between the familiar gestures and the practiced sequences of a life that runs on its own clock, there is a new awareness, not loud, not disruptive. The awareness that a life can be complete and still have one open question. That the question is not about worth or love or connection. That the question is about continuity, about who carries the thread when he sets it down, about whether the next interruption, whenever it arrives, will find someone standing at the property line. He does not need to answer the question tonight. He needs to know that the question exists. He knows that now. The question will be there tomorrow. It is patient. It does not require urgency. It only requires, eventually, the same attention he has given to every other system he has ever maintained. One afternoon, one folder, one conversation, one name on a form given with certainty instead of hesitation. That is the scope of what remains. And the man who built everything else is equipped to build this. The doctor's office will ask again, it always asks. The form will present the same field in the same neutral font with the same indifference to whatever the answer contains. But the next time the question is asked, the pause may be shorter. Not because the question has become simpler, because the man who hears it has already done the harder work. He looked at the structure of his own life with the clarity he brings to everything else, and he found it strong and coherent and worthy of the one addition it has not yet received. The answer, he writes, is his business. The name, the number, the relationship. His to determine. On his timeline. According to his judgment. What matters is not the specific answer. What matters is that the answer, when it comes, is given by a man who understands exactly what the question is asking. Not who do you have? Who continues your life when you are briefly unable to continue it yourself? The rest is architecture. And architecture is something he has always known how to do.